So, hello. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, today is one of those days.
One of those days. Yeah, I know.
Oh man, yeah.
I,
Today
I,
is been this whole week has been a frustrating week, actually. We have a lot going on around here. My wife and I have some plumbing issues at our place. And
plumbing is the worst. Like electricity, you're like, we haven't got like water. It's like a nightmare.
yeah, yeah. So
It's not
we
good.
we had a leak from one of our bathrooms upstairs.
Uh-huh.
And they came and they found that there were two different problems, and they fixed one of them, the simpler one, and then they found the other one that's more complicated. So they haven't fixed that one yet. Meanwhile, we can't use all of the bathroom upstairs. Luckily, we
Yeah.
have another
Yeah.
bathroom downstairs.
Okay. Yeah.
And so the reason it's taking forever is because they found asbestos
Oh no. Yeah.
in the drywall in the
Hmm.
area that they need to access to fix the plumbing issue.
Right.
So,
Right.
and
So
that
everything comes
is
to a standstill, but until they can deal with that, right?
exactly.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
this home was built in the 70s, I think.
Hmm.
So it has some,
Peak asbestos time, right?
it
Throw
has,
asbestos and everything. It's fine.
yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so the area they need to access is downstairs in the ceiling, below, where the bathroom is upstairs, and it's a utility closet. So luckily is pretty isolated. It's inside a utility closet where we have
Hmm.
the water heater,
Right.
and there's a central air unit there as well. And so we're waiting for, just got word today that they're going to be here tomorrow to continue, because the test results came back, and they
Hmm.
have, now they know what they're dealing with, and they're going to come in and
Yeah.
start the abatement process. So we're dealing with that. And then at the same time, we're reconfiguring some rooms in the house. My wife is setting up her office space somewhere
Right.
else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we've moved furniture and all kinds
Oh
of
God.
stuff around, and everything is upside down. It's like,
Uh-huh. I know that feeling well, and I hate it. It's
yeah.
like
And so,
it makes you appreciate the when things are back to normal again so much more, though.
yeah, yeah. And as part of that process, we sold this huge cabinet that we had, kind of like a dresser,
Right.
for clothes
Hmm.
and stuff. But it was like pretty big, and it was too big. We've been wanting to get rid of it for a long time, and we finally sold it online. And that means all of our stuff that was there now is
Now,
everywhere, is out, and we're in transition. We're buying a smaller piece of
yeah.
furniture to,
But you don't have it yet,
but we
so
don't
it's
have it yet. So everything is a mess. The whole house is
yep.
a mess.
Hmm. It has a like a big effect on you, just your mental balance. It's like, oh God,
Yes, it does.
I just go into my laptop world. It's calmer in there, right?
Yeah,
Well, maybe it's not.
see, that's the thing. That's on the personal end of things, but also on the work side of things, I'm dealing with this issue with FusionCast that I still haven't been able to resolve, and so even that's not going the way I want it to go.
Right. But you don't even have the luxury of going away, going out of the house to work and leave the mess behind, right? It's just there.
It's right here. I'm surrounded by it as we speak. Everything is a
Yep.
mess.
I know it well, and it's not fun.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have my sympathy.
Thank you. Yeah, so this recording issue, the recording itself
Hmm.
is working, but the problem is with one of the features that I introduced, which I should have done before from the beginning, which is remote controlled recording, where the host has control of recording. And when the host clicks record, then everyone in the session starts recording automatically remotely. After all, this is a remote recording tool, so it
Yeah.
should have that. And I introduced that feature, and it was working perfectly on my dev environment. Then I pushed it to production, and it doesn't work there for some reason. And I don't understand why. There are no errors. There's nothing. It just doesn't do it. So it's one of those. And I've been in contact with a certain cloud provider that should go without mention. No, they've been great. They've been pretty supportive. Support has been great. The only thing is that
Okay.
it takes forever. The turnaround time
Right.
is, I
Mhm.
send a message and then I have to wait around about 24 hours, before I hear back from them.
Really?
And
Is
then,
this what you're using for basically pushing messages from like the server to the client, right? In order to get it to do something, right?
yeah. So I'm using a couple of different services for that. One of them is that one that we've talked about before, and that seems to be working okay. But the other one is it's a different kind of API
Mm.
that sends more. They're more like UDP type messages.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
client to client kind of
Mhm.
thing, no
Yep.
TCP. So it's
Mm.
more performant,
Mm.
but the nature of that is that there's no guarantee that
Right.
it's going to be received.
Mhm.
So it's like UDP like,
Yep.
protocol messages. And I don't know quite yet if that's even the problem,
Mm.
if it's something to do with UDP or anything like that. So one thing that has been hindering my progress in troubleshooting this is the fact that I don't have, up until this point, I don't have a working staging environment. I just have my
Right.
dev environment and
Yep.
production.
Yep.
And so it kind of, there are certain things that I can't freely do because I don't want to
Yep.
break production.
Right. Mhm.
So the past couple of days I've been working on setting up a proper staging environment, replicating my production environment, and that way I can test all kinds of things without fear of breaking anything.
Mm.
And I can
Mhm.
enable console log, and I can enable all kinds of logs,
Yep.
and not have it be in
Not have
production
it. Yeah, exactly, and risk breaking other people's stuff,
or
right?
exposing,
Mm.
logs or exposing sensitive
Mm.
information. So I'm almost at the end of setting up this staging environment. And it's time consuming because, I have to set up with all these different services and APIs that I use,
It's not so much just that you need to get your software deployed, it's that you're relying on other APIs that all need to be up and running, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have to create the
Yeah.
staging project, so to speak,
Mm.
in each of these
Yeah.
services, right? So, and I have to make sure that I faithfully recreate what I have in
Right.
production.
Yeah.
And
And the worst thing's going to be if it works fine in staging. You're going to be
I
like,
know then, then it's,
you're like, oh, okay.
yeah, but at least, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully,
Let's hope that's
I'm hoping that's not the case. It should not work, and I should be able to see
yeah.
logs and things like that, or enable
Right.
logs and things like that to
Yeah.
trace it.
One of those things that that you needed to do this eventually, but you'd rather have not have done it right now.
Yeah, yeah. So this thing, it's part of the same process that allows me to show. If you notice now, I have indicators
Mm.
that tell you if anybody's mic is muted or
Right.
the camera
Hmm.
is turned off or anything like that. And so those are messages going
Okay.
across that everyone receives, and their UI gets updated accordingly.
Yeah.
And so that same mechanism drives the remote controlled
And
recording.
those are
So
working?
it works partially.
Okay.
See here, if I disable my camera,
Okay. Yeah, that
do
works.
you see a
Yep.
little red icon
Yep.
now?
That works fine.
That
Hmm.
works fine. But for some reason, that part is working. But if I enable the remote controlled recording, which actually did it through a flag, so there's a flag
Mm.
now in the
Hmm.
podcast that you can turn on or off. So right now I turned it off so that we can
Mm.
record. So when that flag is on, only I have a record button as a host. You
Mm.
as a guest wouldn't see a record button.
Sure. Yep.
And but turning that flag off puts everything back the way it was with you having a record button as well.
Yep. Yep.
And so when that flag is on and the host controls recording, if I hit record, then that same mechanism that's sending data that updates the UI also sends a signal for you to start recording. Every participant in the
Mm.
session starts
Hmm.
recording. And for some reason, that part is not working. So it's, I don't know.
That's frustrating.
Yeah,
So
it
yeah,
is.
you need to know if it's getting the message, and if it is getting the message, why isn't it starting? And if it isn't, then why not?
Exactly.
And you don't want to do that in production because you're fiddling around with logs and yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And the reason I found out about it was because one of the people that I onboarded a little while back actually used FusionCast to record, and he ran into some problems
Ah,
trying to record. But luckily, he noticed that backup recording was on. So he still went on and recorded an episode with
mm,
guests.
mm,
And, I'm assuming he knew that backup recording recording was on. So he took his chances and still did it. There was no local recording for anybody else but
Yeah.
himself, but backup recording was there. And so he messaged me later and asked me if I could give him the backups. And so I did. Everything was there.
I mean, that's good to know as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's at
Yeah.
least that there is the backup facility, and there is the that recording is there. So that hopefully gives him confidence that, oh, okay, even if things do go wrong, then that's still that works fine, right?
Exactly. So I was able to provide the backups to him, and I apologized, and I told him I'm looking into it, and I said hopefully that the rest of the experience wasn't too bad, and he said no, it was great. We actually enjoyed it. So hopefully that didn't leave a bad flavor. But
Well, it's better to find out now with one person than later with 100, right?
yeah, very true.
We'll get to the bottom of it once you got staging up. I'm sure it'll be one of those obvious things that it's like a one character fix, and you'll be like, oh, only that.
Maybe, yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. So after that, I sent that email to everyone that I have onboarded just to give them a heads up. And I'm sure you received that email.
Yes, I was going to say it might be worth clarifying, because my takeaway with that was, I can't do local recording, rather than just say, like the auto recording. Just to clarify, the auto recording isn't working. So
Yeah. I guess, yeah, that's a good suggestion. I wasn't sure how to handle that, because that's a new feature that people didn't know about, and so I didn't want to convolute the message with there's new features and this and that. So I
That's
just
true,
wanted to keep it kind of straight. But because I was looking forward to sending this email with an update of all the features that I've been working on and all the changes that I've put in based on the feedback that I received. And then this thing happened. And so now I have to deal with this. And I feel like I can't send an update about new features when this thing is not working
the
properly.
fundamental basic is kind of having an issue, right?
Yeah. So it's like kind of frustrating, but
yeah, it's strange that you said it works locally. I mean, is it possible it's some just permission issue because it's accessing camera and microphone? So if it may be trying to do that programmatically is just causing some
could be
permission issue. It sounds like it to me. If it's one thing that would probably be my first thing I looked at, is just the fact that it is a permissions, like the fact that the browser is triggering the camera without a user interaction, right? So programmatically triggering the camera or microphone could be something to do with that. That would just be I've never used this stuff, so I have no idea, but that would be the thing which would make me think there's an issue, especially since it works locally, right?
Yeah. Well, the only thing is by then camera is already given permission, microphone is already
right.
It's already going, and
that's going great. But I'm wondering if there's some way it's because it obviously starts capturing it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one, and I hope it's not something that simple, because man, that's gonna suck. If it's like something super simple that I missed and I've been breaking my head this whole time.
But you've got staging up and running now, or it's close?
Almost. Yeah, I just need to finish a few areas here and there, but yeah, I almost have it all up and running.
Cool. Right.
And then I have to do some DNS updates so that I get my staging domain going.
Yeah. Oh, well, good luck. That sounds like a nightmare and stressful. Especially since you have people trying to use it now. It's like the pressure's on now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Feel like you're against the clock. Well, it's good practice.
Yeah, good. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's not optimum.
Yeah. So needless to say, I haven't really had time to put together our podcast episode. So
his priority is get this working first, and then
so I apologize. I really want to get that going, but I have to focus on this for now. But but we'll get there. We'll get there. I can't wait to be in a position where we can outsource editing to somebody else, and so that way we just record and we don't have to worry about it.
It just happens, right?
And it just magically appears on the podcatcher.
That'd be the best, wouldn't it? Yeah, it's like, especially, well, I mean, that's the nice thing because you have the possibility of somebody else going in and grabbing the files. You literally don't have to do anything. You just be like, tell them just record it, finish, and it just appears, right?
Yeah.
That'd be the ultimate.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's
what
I'm working towards that.
That's a goal. You got to have a good goal, right?
Yeah. So let's see what else. What else do I have to update? I contacted somebody else to onboard, and I just noticed today they scheduled a date.
Oh, cool.
I think it's next week or so. I have to double check, but I have another one lined up to do a demo. Someone from MicroConf that I came across on the community there, and I'm going to be doing the demo. And then somebody else also from MicroConf that I had already on my list contacted me about it, and I was like, oh yeah, I have you on my list. So I just sent out my Calendly to this other person, and hopefully we'll get something scheduled and do another demo there as well. Let's see what else we have. Like I mentioned earlier, most of the changes based on feedback that I received are already in, except for
the UI
a few
is
things.
starting to look very tidy. It's starting to, as I said before, it's amazing how it looks like, oh, everything's fine, and then you do some improvements, and it's like, now it looks better. I didn't know it was a problem before, but it feels better. So I noticed you got your like ellipses thing in, and they got these status icons and things. It's looking nice.
Yeah, it's getting there. Thank you. Thanks. Oh, notice I implemented the Hashids library.
I noticed. I was going to ask about that. So that's kind of fun, isn't it? It's handy thing. So it's nice just to be able to throw stuff in, and then you just decode it and it's done, right?
Yeah, it was cool. I like it. I like the short little hash, and I like how it looks now. It's a little more, I don't know, more professional, so to speak.
No, I mean, it's the same with mine, because especially if you're looking at like a check-in and it's in a profile or some sort of users, a particular user's check-in. So rather than having /7/13, it's like something, and you're like, okay, it must be secure then.
And I didn't do it for all of the app just yet, because I have a lot of IDs everywhere, and so I figured this is the most public facing URL,
exactly.
right? And so I just
I had to think the same. It was what's the most likely thing that's going to be cut and paste is really the thing which made me decide what to encode like that. And there's a possibility for mine. It would be a reference to a particular check-in or a particular user. So those are the things that I did first, and then just other things as I come across them, I might change them. But
okay, so you didn't implement it across the board yet?
I think there's a few places where it's not using it. I didn't. That wasn't how I intended to do it. That wasn't how I implemented it. It was like, okay, where do I want it implemented, and just pick out particular ones. And then it's like, well, if I come across one and I'm working on something, I'll think, okay, do I change that while I'm here? And so as you said, it's not a priority for every single page. It's just certain things which are likely to be cut and paste, or is an obvious reference to an internal that you don't really want to expose. So in particular user ID, which is especially at this stage, I say, when we're talking like tens of numbers or single digits, and it's like, although that's funny because I had the original photo sharing thing that I did back in 2002, that was I was still it was the first web application I ever built. It was 2002. It was pretty much an interface to your database. And so of course IDs were just exposed as numbers, and it became a kind of like a badge of pride for people as well, because they were like, I'm number 100, or there was one that was 7, and they incorporated 7 into their profile image and stuff like that. So it's kind of, it became a bit of a badge, that ID number. And to be honest, even with like Twitter, because I'm number 5,000 and something ID in Twitter, before they implemented these crazy long digits that don't really mean so much. Originally, they just had incremental IDs. So it's a little bit of a badge of pride. It's like, yay, I was there.
You were early adopter.
I didn't get it at first, but I was like, okay, this has got to be interesting then. And no, it's not. I came around. So yeah, so I've had an interesting week as well, as you may have noticed.
Yeah. So,
Not quite as hectic as yours, but interesting nonetheless. So yeah, I sent out a bunch of invitations. So I was quite the the reasoning or the choice of first invitations to send out was people who I knew would be picky about or spot things that I've missed. So rather than go for someone who's at like the perfect user, it was like,
mhm,
okay, let's get all these niggles ironed out. And so choose, 5 people who I know are going to be like, that's wrong. That looks weird. This
yeah,
pick all the things which I know I'm blind to now. Which you know yourself. You're looking at something and someone says
yeah,
that's the wrong color, and you're like, oh yeah, of course it is.
yeah.
So yeah, I was kind of selective with those, and it was perfect for that because all of the feedback I got was interesting. They were all unique and not really anything overlapping. So different people saw different things, and all of them were either immediately like actionable or things which are like, okay, that's a really interesting thing to consider for the next release. So yeah, almost all of them I've been able to incorporate already. Some of them, as you know, some of them are like 5 minute. It feels great just to now have a to-do list to just be able to check through. And there was very few which I disagreed with, which was nice as well. All of the points were things that it's funny. Some of them. So one of the things when you're editing, if you've added items and you're editing them,
Mhm.
clicking away used to leave the form field open because when I first added that, I couldn't get the input blur thing working properly with live view as I wanted it to. It was kind of half working, but it never felt right. So therefore I was like, okay, it feels less weird to leave it than it does to have this weird state where it doesn't always do what I wanted it to, and so someone's feedback was, okay, the blur feels weird, and I'm like, yeah, I know it is. When I did this, it's just like, oh yeah, I know, and I really let me have a look, and it literally took 1 minute to make it work. And so talk about leaving something and coming back to it, looking at it fresh because I haven't looked at this for probably a few months, definitely 3 or 4 months, and so I was like, this will make it work, and I did it, and it was like 2 minutes, and it
Ah,
worked exactly as I wanted it to, and it felt perfectly right, and I'm like,
nice.
phew. I'm glad I didn't bother wasting days trying to get it working before, because like fixing it now was just so easy. So I don't know whether that was me understanding live view better, live view fixing something that wasn't working before, or I'm not sure exactly what the reason I couldn't get it to work properly before was. I'm going to
Mhm.
play live view just because it's easier than blaming myself.
Okay.
But it's mostly probably my fault. So that was really nice to be able to just improve it in ways that I knew were not great, and somebody to point it out and then immediately be able to improve it. And I'm like, that's exactly how I wanted it to work in the first place. Thank you for reminding me to relook at it. And yeah, even some of your feedback was really helpful. Just like alignments and the button stuff, some of the hover states I improved. It feels significantly better to me now than it did 2 weeks ago. So, and that's a direct result of people's feedback. And I say I think there's 7 invitations I've sent out, 5 who have given good feedback, 2 who I think have been on Easter vacation. So I'm going to
Mhm.
poke again, and at probably end of this week, give them a week to recover coming back. So it's been, really helpful. So that's been kind of fun. So the next step now is to introduce the people who I think could actually be the kind of like the ideal use cases of specifically around teams.
Mhm.
So all of
Mhm.
the people I picked right now are either basically using it by themselves.
But yeah, yeah.
Uh,
That's
yeah,
how I've been using it by
right.
myself. And but it surprisingly it works well. I mean, yes, it's designed for teams, and
Mm,
it's teams could take better advantage of it,
mm,
but it surprisingly works. I mean, surprisingly in terms of
yeah.
because your main focus is for teams, but it
Mm.
works really well with a solo
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I
environment.
use it myself every day, right? So this is my own thing, and it's I know how useful it is just for me. So that doesn't surprise. It's surprising that other people have picked up on it, but it doesn't surprise me that much because it's like, yeah, I know, I know it's actually useful.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's good to hear. But at the same, because it's not optimized for that, there's a lot of things that could be done better if it was just for you, right? So that is definitely something that I'm thinking more about, simply because it's easier to convince one person to use it than to convince five, right? So, someone will try it out for themselves and then potentially invite other people. So the single person use case is something I want to think about a little bit more in the reasonable close future as well, just because I think it's actually has a lot of use. I think it'd be good to spend a bit of time on. I just haven't really given it as much thought as I have the team side. So it's funny because you're not the only person that said that either. I've had a few other people say, this is actually really useful just for me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So I've been using it, here and there. I want to get more into it and use it even more, but I have been using it occasionally just to, get a feel for it and give you feedback. But I like it a lot. I like the interface is playful. It's, pretty modern and it just feels good. I like what you've done with that. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I I I think some interfaces tend to be kind of rigid, or utilitarian.
Yes.
Even FusionCast, sometimes I question some of my choices and just the structure, because I made it very structured and just to trying to give it a sense of order, I guess,
Right.
or but I like how you accomplish that. I mean, it makes sense, it looks intuitive, and at the same time it's playful. And I guess what I mean by playful is just that it doesn't have this utilitarian feel to it where everything is rows and columns. It's you know what I mean.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it
No,
almost
it's
it
funny
al-
because so somebody else gave me the feedback. Yeah, it feels in one way kind of old school web, even though it's using modern technologies, and
yes.
it feels a little bit more retro in the way that it isn't regimented. And I guess that's my personal preferences coming out strongly.
Yes, yes.
But I know the I know
That's a good way to describe it. It's like old school, but with the modern touch of the modern UI.
Cool. That's really good to hear. That's very reassuring, because that's something that bugs the hell out of me about the current state of the web. Is just everything's becoming very too feels corporate, even when it's an indie project. It still feels like things are coming from a corporation. It's like, I want your personality to come through too. So I
Yeah.
tried to, and there's something I'm trying hard with the copy and things as well. So I've started playing with copy.ai. Have you seen it? Have you played with it?
No, no.
It's cool. It's a indie hacker project. It's two guys, I think,
Huh.
and it uses the GPT-3 machine learning data prediction, text prediction rewriting thing. So you give it a description or some copy. You basically tell it what you want or what you want to say,
Okay.
and it will rephrase it in multiple different ways. So, for instance, you can use it for, say, your landing page, like hero text. You describe your project, and it gives you like 10 different examples of copy that you could use as hero text for your project. And I'm not using it to directly, but as a way of like unblocking your mind, because when you think about something, you get stuck in a rut, right?
Yeah.
So even just like the copy on my homepage, where as in after you've logged in, there's a kind of a dashboard page that shows you other people have logged in. So the text there that's like, good morning, other people have done things, have you finished this? So I write it as how I'd want to say it first. And then once you've done that, you kind of get stuck in that. You can't see other ways of writing it, right? So you throw it in copy AI and it says, how about these? And you're like, okay, I wasn't thinking of that, but that some part of that wording sounds better than my wording. So
Huh.
it's a kind of just a way of getting your brain out of that groove and just trying different things. So I highly recommend it. It's I think there's a 7-day completely free trial, and then it's like $30 a month. And it's got a thing for like email subjects that are catchy. So again, you say what your email is, and it says, how about these as email subjects? And you're like, that one.
Ah,
That's the tone that I want. It's got a thing for like blog ideas. So you tell it what your blog's about, and it says, how about these? And they're all AI generated. So they kind of are coming from a reasonably sensible place, but some of them are way out. But the general mix is quite fun. So that's really helping me improve my copy, simply because it's making me try different things that I wouldn't necessarily come up with myself. So highly would have
nice. What
recommended playing with
what is it called again? Copy
.ai.
AI. Huh. How did you find out about this one?
I don't know. Twitter.
On
Pretty much
Twitter.
everything I
Yeah.
know comes from Twitter these days.
Right. Yeah.
So the two founders are on Twitter. They're doing a build in public. I think their revenue is starting to go significantly. They were like, I mean, they're tens of thousands, I think, a month. But they give updates on their MRR regularly.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
they seem to be onto something quite good. And it is a really simple web app. It's just an interface to GPT-3, but with specific context. So you say, this is, I want this type of thing. It does like sentence rewriting, things like that. So it's well worth playing with. If you
Nice.
want landing page copy or email copy, things like that. Just
Mm-hmm.
although you like your landing page is already pretty good as well, but it could be a way of just trying to get different ideas.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I'm looking at their website. Site looks cool too.
it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really good to hear. I'm very happy to hear that it feels like it's there's a million things that I really want it to do, and I've been desperate to just not get too bogged down in doing everything. So hopefully the functionality it provides right now has a use and it is useful, and now I can start to build on top of that. So that's the hope.
Yeah. Yeah. It's looking good. It's looking really good. I like using it. I'm going to be using it more. I started using it for FusionCast related tasks, so to
Mhm.
speak. And so as I get more into it, I'll give you more feedback, whatever I come across. But yeah, it's looking really good. I like it.
That's good, thank you. So I think the thing which I find it's helpful with, so I especially on a solo project, using like an issue tracker just feels like completely way too heavy,
Mm.
even though it might probably be a good idea. It's right now it just feels too much, but at the same time having a kind of a notepad of like, yeah, these are the things I need to do, this is the thing I need to do next,
Mhm.
and I've done it. So having that kind of way of organizing it and recording it, it just seems it works well for me. Hopefully others find the same thing too. So
Yeah.
just having that list of, yeah, I need to think about those things, moving that to, this is my thing, these are the three things I'm going to do next. I mean, I've even almost, there's lots of things that I thought about trying to like codify and recommend, but I kind of want people to figure those things out for themselves as well, figure out what works best for them. So I'm trying not to be too heavy-handed with like, what is your main thing? Like, choose three things, and it's like, they're
Yeah.
adults, they can figure it out, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm glad. I'm glad you're going in that direction. It's a little more, it just gives freedom to people to use it in the best way it fits for
Yeah,
them,
I mean, so I mean, one of the things that's, again, I guess this is a product, a byproduct of me being an old school web user and fan of, like, my favorite web apps that I still feel I learned a lot from, and are my kind of favorite types of web apps are things like the original Delicious before it became
Yeah.
something that the original Flickr, when, and all of them are still, they have this aspect of like human hacking. So they give you loads of features and they say, you figure it out. So communities naturally form around like Flickr tags or like albums and things. And same with Delicious. People come up with different ways of using it that weren't necessarily on the original roadmap, or it wasn't the original design. They created by the users. I mean, like Twitter's hashtags and apps is the same, right? They weren't
Yeah.
originally part of the original design, but they came out of people finding ways to use it that weren't necessarily conceived by the original app. So my hope is to create something that has a similar kind of ethos, something that is, here's a bunch of tools, you figure out the best way of using them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then as people use it and you see patterns, then maybe make those, more first order features. But yeah, I don't want to force those down people's throats, which again, like certain, newer apps tend to be like, this is how you use it. And you're like, I don't feel like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
That's
That's
awesome.
really good to know. I appreciate the comment that I hope that's come through.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and it's been nice also to see no bugs, as in no Sentry things appear in my email, which is nice.
Yeah.
That's one of the best things, is like, oh, it seems to be working for everybody.
Yeah. So far, everything that the things that I shared with you have been just really cosmetic and, kind of superficial, like not any errors. I haven't come across any errors.
So I'm curious, because
Nothing
you're
breaking.
in US West, right? So this is obviously hosted on AWS US West. So I guess is it Oregon? Is that, I'm not sure.
Oregon, yeah, it's west.
So that's reasonably close to you, right? So
Yeah.
since this is used in live view, this has a more latency for me, a lot more latency for me than you, and it still feels okay for me. There's an 80 millisecond, you can't get faster than that.
Yeah.
So that's like the best case scenario. So because a lot of there's two types of interaction on the site. There's ones which are using Alpine, which are like drop down menus and hover states, things like that. And then there's live view actions, which are basically, it uses the WebSocket to basically tell the server what's happened, and the server responds with a chunk of HTML that's replaced on the page. So anything as far as your plan in terms of checking off something, moving something, editing something, clicking on a plan item, changing it to an edit state, all of those are actually responses from the server. The HTML is given back by the server. So I'm curious how responsive it feels like when you're close by. Is it feel pretty like almost instantaneous?
It feels pretty instantaneous to me. It
Nice.
Yeah, there's really not any noticeable latency at all. It just
Cool.
Yeah, it's very snappy.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
good to know. I mean, there's, I don't want to say it's noticeable. I notice it because I know what I'm looking for when I'm doing it here.
Yeah.
I notice it because it's like, there's an 80 probably 100 milliseconds, rounded up, between clicking on a plan and it becoming editable. There's ways I could change that so it happens on the client first, but using just straightforward raw live view to do it, that's how it does it. So yeah, that's kind of, I wish I was a bit closer to the server. But it's nice being the worst case, right? Well, I guess Australia would be a worst case. It still feels absolutely good enough from here. So yeah, I can imagine it's better.
So your server is in Oregon, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. So is that AWS?
Yeah.
Can you share or okay?
Yes, on AWS. So I'm using a service called GigElixir, which is kind of Heroku for Elixir, and they have the option of going through Google or Amazon. You can choose. They've got set up, I think, on 4 or 2 Amazon, 2 Google data centers that you can choose. And US West one is the optimum for me because it's the closest to me, and it's kind of the, I guess if you're in the US, you'd probably choose, US Central on Google is probably a best case. But for me, it's closer to me, personal request. Yeah. And also it feels like a good balance for everybody. Yeah. So if it works for me, then it should be fine for everybody else, was my thinking there.
Yeah, exactly. I did the same thing. My servers are in Oregon too. And I figured it doesn't nowadays, it doesn't really, with the internet, it doesn't really matter because you can have people connecting from the other side of the world. So even if I were to go with a data center, in the middle of the US, it doesn't really matter because people connecting from Japan or Asia or some, anywhere.
Exactly.
It's still going to be around the world,
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, so someone has recommended Cloudflare Argo to me, which is Cloudflare's it basically optimizes the path from the client to the server. So say you're going from Australia, you might end up with, multiple routes, which some are far from optimum. Using Argo, it's expensive, as in it's when you look at but apparently it does significantly minimize that route or optimize the route. So you basically get like preferred route from wherever to the server. But I'm hoping I don't have to pay for that. So
yeah.
anyway,
That's
thankfully the servers and Elixir are quick enough that the response from the server is so quick that I'm basically dealing with latency. That's the only expense. It's a millisecond or two for the server to create the response, and then you just got latency.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I wonder if it's more cost effective to, before going that route of, Cloudflare enhanced features or whatever, I wonder if it's more cost effective to just up the server, first. If you need a boost in performance, just up the caliber of the server that you're running on, and until you exhaust,
exactly.
that
I mean,
option,
for in my case, especially, the slowest bit is always going to be the latency, because the database is on RDS, and so I did this Founders Live thing, month or so ago, right? So I got a bunch of AWS credits for that, like $5,000 worth of AWS credits, good for 2 years. So I'm like, yeah, big database. So
nice.
So I'm basically spending way more than I ever would personally on an RDS configuration, but because of that, the database is now not the issue. So the actual CPU bound tasks are very minimal right now because Elixir's pretty damn quick, and the database is right next to it, and that's really quick. So it's all latency pretty much. Yeah. So I hopefully that will be able to maintain that kind of balance. That we'll see how that goes.
Yeah,
I'd require users for that to change, right?
Yeah, true.
So that's been a fun week or week and a half of responding to that and just seeing how people have using it. I set up Mixpanel's basic response tracking. So I'm trying to use, there's two ways I'm trying to record how people are using it. So I'm using a service called Bento, which is made by somebody local, for being able to trigger like email drips and things like that. So that's the thing I'm trying to design right now, is like, when do I want to do things and what do I want them to do? So I want to start thinking about that process of like, okay, they've logged in, they've created an organization, but they haven't checked in yet. Well, in that case, if they haven't done that for a day, maybe send them an email to say, why don't you do this? Well, if they've checked in but they haven't invited somebody, then maybe recommend them to do that. So I'm setting up that service to do that, and I need to figure out the flow of emails for that.
But do you do that programmatically with an API?
So
it integrates with your code?
So he has two things. There's either a JavaScript API, which will basically just trigger page changes, but they also have an API, which I'm actually writing an Elixir module for, to be able to do that programmatically. But basically just say, they've done this, they've done this, they've done this. So you just send events. So Mixpanel has exactly the same thing in terms of triggering recording events. You basically just say, this user, you just give them a number, this user did this, and you just send strings of, created an account, signed up, created organization, invited user. So I'm basically just sending a bunch of events down to Mixpanel. And then on Mixpanel, you can basically queries to make a dashboard of those things. So I say, so right now I've got a graph which says number of signups per day. And so every time you basically can say, show the number of times we get that event uniquely per day. And so you get a graph of signups per day. Same with number of check-ins or like number of plans created. So I have a little graph of little bar chart of how many plans have been created today, how many check-ins have been created. So you can see how the usage patterns are. So without getting all, nosy about who did what, this just gives me an overview of like, some people did this thing this many times without being too
invasive,
affecting people. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't care. I don't want to see. I don't want to know anything that anybody's doing. But it's useful to me to know how often people are checking in. So how often, how many people have made plans today, or how many people have checked off plans today. So just by triggering like telemetry events of when someone's done something, I can just say, again, it's a hashed user ID, so I don't know who did it. All I know is that at this point in time, a user, and it's unique because it's hashed, did this thing. So, and again, Mixpanel have like this space, I guess, is highly competitive for, like, I guess there's 100 different people trying to be the one provider. I guess like Segment.io, Mixpanel, Data Box. There's a bunch of these.
A bunch of
So
them, yeah.
Mixpanel have a thing where you can just say you're a startup. I've literally a new customer startup, and they give you $50,000 worth of credits, and I'm like, okay. So I mean, it's fake money, right? But at the same time, it means I can use the service for free for a year as much as I want. So
Yeah.
I guess after that they'll get you, and I'll decide, either I'm in a position where I can afford to continue, or I can't and don't need to, because so at least it gives you a year to figure out what to do with it. So yeah, I'd recommend doing that if you want to get an idea. I mean, in your case, you could literally say, somebody created a schedule and a call. Somebody started a call, someone joined a call, someone started a recording. You can basically so you can trigger it either via JS or via server side. Mm-hmm. And again, as long as it's just hash the user ID in a specific way, you can just get a dashboard of those events, and just knowing, I mean, I literally just have a dashboard there, and I just can see one person signed up today, someone accepted an invite, somebody, 5 plans have been created, 2 have been checked off. So it just gives me an idea of actually usage patterns without getting too invasive. Or
that sounds awesome. Yeah, I would like to do that, something like that at some point.
Yes, I highly recommend just to get that idea. And say then the next thing for me is looking at Bento to get the same thing going with like email drips, because somebody signs up, right now I've just got, the welcome email goes out, and I've got the invitation email goes out, but I then want to separate the kind of like the sales emails from that. So something, that goes out when people do particular things. Yeah, I'm like, I want to manage that outside of my application. I don't want to write that in my code. That's like a nightmare.
Yeah.
So also, I don't know if you've noticed, but I also have email reminders that you can create from within the application as well. So you can say, like, email me at 6 p.m. every day to do a check-in. So,
okay. Ooh,
yeah,
I didn't know that.
Well, that's the thing. Nobody else has created one apart from me. So I'm like, okay, but because I can see that on Mixpanel, I'm like, okay, I need to prioritize that. Like, so I'm doing it now after you've basically created an organization or joined an organization.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to come up with an info banner. So I'm thinking of putting it in like the top right of the dashboard page.
Okay.
Kind of put a box around it to say, did you know you can set a daily reminder or something?
Mm-hmm.
Close it if you don't want it to go away. But I'm thinking of using that space as like a recommendation of what to do kind of thing. So if you haven't invited somebody, then why don't you invite a teammate? If they haven't created a reminder, maybe remind them to do that, or otherwise just use it for something fun if there's nothing to tell them. So kind of a space that is that the top right of the dashboard page. Use that for something informative, or like a did you know, or that kind of space. So
that sounds good. That sounds like a really good idea.
But again, Mixpanel showing me that no one has created a reminder is like,
yeah,
probably should do something about that, because right now it's just in the settings page. If you go to settings, there's reminders, and so I'm curious about that as well, because that was a nightmare to write from a time zone point of view.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. Time zone is such a pain.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously, if you say you want it to go out at 6 p.m. and I say I want it to go out at 6 p.m., they're different things.
Yeah.
So I want to. The next thing I want to add is say I want to send it at 6 p.m. on weekdays. Right now, it just sends it every day. I want it so you can say send it at 5:30 every weekday. So then I've got to basically check anybody who's needs a reminder. Well, what day is it? Not just what time is it for them, but what day is it for them? And that's fun.
Huh.
And that changes, obviously, if I suddenly go back to the UK for a week, I want that kind of to follow me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So because it updates the user's time zone when you log in. So anytime you go to the dashboard, it basically records your current time zone via the browser. So that those reminders will actually then automatically reschedule, because it just uses UTC to store. So those from that point on will then be 5 p.m. in the UK rather than 5 p.m. Japan.
Right.
So that should work.
Yeah, it
All
should
my
with sound.
tests of it work, but I'm curious now to have some other people in different time zones use it to see how it make sure it works, confirm that I'm not going crazy and my tests are actually useful.
Okay, I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna
Cool.
do
Good to
something with
know.
it, and I'll report back.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so my plan for this weekend is to basically invite some teams. I've improved the invitation system page a little bit as well to give a little bit of information as to what you're doing. As you mentioned, a lot of the UI is, some of it's good, some of it is very utilitarian, and the invitation page was one of them. It worked, and then I was like, I wasn't in the mindset to figure out how to fix that, how to display it. So I spent a bit of time with that last night. So it now has like a description. You can add a message. There's like a default message that you can send as part of your invitation. You can change that, and so that's improved somewhat. So now as
Nice.
that's working, I'm gonna try and add this little information box on the dashboard, and then send out to some teams at the weekend and cross my fingers and hope for somebody wants to use it. So
Nice. Nice.
it's been good. It's simultaneously like, oh, this is great. I've got some users, and also like, oh crap, I've got users now. Like, what if nobody wants it? What if nobody uses it? So it's like before that point, it's anything's possible, right? And then you're
Yeah.
like, oh crap, no one's logged in today. Like, why
Yeah.
not? Oh, it's Sunday. Oh yeah, that's why. But you get a little bit. I say, right now it's still very early, like learning days, and because of the people I've invited, I don't expect massive like
Usage.
use. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
going to be trying things, dipping their toes into it. But
And that's the way it goes. I find myself in a similar situation. I've onboarded a few people, and only a couple of people have logged on and tried it. I think I'm only aware of one person who actually recorded an episode,
mm-hmm.
and which I mentioned earlier, had a little bit
Didn't
of
go
problem,
perfectly,
but
right?
yeah, it didn't go perfectly, but he was able to record, and yeah. So in my case, I have to understand that some of these people, they already have a solution, and they're just kind enough to be willing to give
Yeah.
my product a try, and just they're interested in checking it out, and they might schedule a session here and there at some point, or they might be waiting for a chance to give it a try without it being like a critical recording session that they
Yes.
want to
Yeah.
do, because after all, this is still beta. So I totally understand if it takes them a while to get to it.
And plus, it's not something, well, unless you're a professional full-time podcaster, right? It's not something that you're going to have, okay, I'm going to use this right now. It's like, no, I'll have there's a recording that I need to do next Wednesday. And, the usage patterns are going to be not necessarily predictable or regular, like maybe regular, but not frequent.
Totally. And yeah, and we'll see. One thing I wanted to mention before we wrap it up, the problem that we had with your recording last time, which today you were not able to get in without the recovery mode popping up, was because and I've addressed this issue already, but before, the leave button, when I, as a host, select to leave the session, it ends the session for everybody else. Well, it wasn't checking for the state of others in the session. And so if you were still uploading, it'll kick you out. So I changed that so that now, as the host, if you select to end the session, it won't let you unless everyone in the session is done uploading.
Yeah, gotcha.
So it checks for that now. Before, it was only checking for the local, the local state.
Yep.
And so that's what happened last time. When I ended the session, you were still uploading, and it kicked you out, and it didn't get a chance to finish.
See, this is why we're doing it. This is why we're making these.
Yeah.
Help you debug all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's difficult, this stuff. I mean, especially asynchronous, synchronous and asynchronous, because you need these things to happen, but you don't know when they're going to happen, right? So it's
it's crazy.
It's tricky, man.
Yep.
It's close. Just get this recording bug sorted and you'll be good.
I know. Cool. All
Oh
right.
man,
So maybe it's a good time to wrap it up.
sounds like it.
And
So if I hit stop recording now,
okay.
and then so I'm just thinking, give it time to finish. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good.